Ukraine and Russia have reached agreement on the removal of hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers from the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. Around 600 members of the so-called Azov Regiment have been trapped there for weeks. Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister said the soldiers were being taken by Russia through a humanitarian corridor for medical treatment in Russian-held territory. Several buses carrying the soldiers left the plant on Monday night. Now, the move means that Ukraine has now effectively ceded full control of the city of Mariupol to Russia.
Departing in darkness and under Russian guard, the first Ukrainian troops have left the Azovstal steelworks after weeks of fierce resistance. Buses brought 53 of the worst injured to a hospital here in the nearby Russian-controlled town of Novoazovsk. Ukrainian officials said another 211 soldiers had been taken to separatist territory further north. President Zelensky made clear that getting Azovstal's defenders home was a priority.
We hope to save the lives of our boys. Among them are heavily wounded. They are being treated. I want to underline Ukraine needs its Ukrainian heroes alive. This is our principle. The work continues to bring our boys home, and it requires delicacy and time.
It's unclear just how many soldiers are still left inside the heavily bombarded Azovstal complex. But the evacuation seems to indicate that the long and bitter siege is drawing to an end. The Ukrainian army announced late on Monday that the main goal now was to save the lives of the remaining defenders.
Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Max Zander in Lviv, and I asked him what more we know about the 260 troops that have been evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant.
So that's right, Anya. So from what we know right now is that more than 260 defenders, Ukrainian military personnel, were evacuated from the Azov steel plant. 53 of them are supposed to be in a critical condition, are supposed to be heavily wounded, and will receive medical treatment in Russian-held territory. And the remaining roughly 211 are supposed to be transferred and then later take part in a prisoner swap. Needless to say, the situation in the Azovstal steelworks, we've heard of it a lot in the last couple of months, was incredibly dire. So the people who were fighting there were all in a quite difficult condition. There have been many calls for their evacuation, though not to Russian territory, something that the Russians would not agree on or did not agree on in the past. So now it seems that this indicates a change in politics there in the region, actually sending military personnel, Ukrainians, into Russian territory and putting them into that situation. But as we heard just now in that report, the priority now seems to be to save lives and do whatever it takes.
DW correspondent Max Zander reporting there from Lviv. And we are joined now by Dr. Anton Chekovtsov, Director of the Center for Democratic Integrity and a Senior Fellow at the Free Russia Foundation. He joins us from Vienna. Welcome to DW. Dr. Chekovtsov, is the evacuation of Ukrainian soldiers from the Azovstal plant a victory for Russia?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I must say, no, this is not a victory for the Russian Federation, because the defenders of the Azovstal plant have totally fulfilled the order of the High Command of Ukraine. They have drawn overwhelming forces of the Russian Federation, and they defended Mariupol, I think, even for a longer period than anyone could have thought that they would be able to defend the city for such a long time. So it's not a victory.
Now, they have been taken by Russian soldiers to Russian-controlled territory. How likely is it that a prisoner exchange will happen and that the evacuees will be brought back to Ukrainian territory?
You see, Ukraine has around 1,000 of the Russian prisoners of war, And I really hope that the Russians will not try to put their own POWs in danger. So, of course, the defenders of Azovstal being taken to the Russia-occupied territories, this is not good news. But I do hope that the leadership of Ukraine has thought through this particular scenario and has ensured that nothing really happens, nothing bad happens to Ukrainian prisoners of war now. And as we know, unfortunately, sometimes the Russian soldiers and officers actually kill Ukrainian POWs in violation of all humanitarian and international rules of war. I really hope that doesn't happen now.
Can we talk about what these evacuations mean for the direction of the war and for Ukraine?
We see that Russia is retreating on many directions. We saw that several weeks ago it started the retreat from the Kiev region. Now we're seeing the retreat of the Russian forces from the Kharkiv region, from that direction. They will try, because of course they are suffering heavy losses in many directions. What I think is going to happen now, they are going to fortify their positions in the Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblast. So basically the regions that are attached to the, not attached, but very close to the annexed Crimea, but also they are going to fortify their positions in the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Unfortunately, yes, Mariupol is now practically occupied entirely by the Russian invaders, and of course, unfortunately, the war crimes that were committed by the Russian forces will have to wait for investigations of the international bodies. But I do believe that the occupation, the total occupation of Mariupol, will not hold for long.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Dr. Anton Chekovtsov, Director of the Center for Democratic Integrity in Vienna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Russia accuses members of the Azov Regiment of being neo-Nazis. Some analysts refute this, saying that it may have been true when the battalion was first founded in 2014, but that since then they have become less radical. DW's Fanny Fachar has been investigating this claim, and among the people she spoke to was the sister of one of the fighters who has been holed up in the Azovstal steelworks.
For Natalia, the war in Ukraine has been a time of intense worry and reflection. She's thinking a lot about her younger brother these days.
This is my brother Artem at school when he was 8 or 9.
Natalia recalls a very normal childhood growing up in Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine.
I always considered Artem to be a creative person and that he would go down a more creative path. I never thought he'd become a soldier.
But when the war in Donbass began in 2014, Natalia says Artem changed.
He knew that sooner or later the aggressor will bring war to our country, and he knew that he needed to prepare.
Artem, who's 26, joined the Azov Regiment a few years ago. It was formed as a volunteer militia group and later became part of the National Guard. He's still holed up here in the Azovstal steel plant, the last holdout of Ukraine's forces in the port city of Mariupol. The regiment released these pictures displaying the horrible conditions some of their fighters are in. Putin accuses the unit of being Nazis. He's justified his invasion by claiming that Ukraine needs, in his words, denazifying, which has drawn a backlash globally. Here in Kyiv, the unit is seen as heroes. Billboards have sprung up supporting the soldiers.
I am expressing huge gratitude for them for standing for us, for our Ukraine. For Putin, as for every Russian, Every Ukrainian is radical, but we only want to live on our own, and we strive to speak our own language. And every Azov soldier is a Ukrainian.
Vyacheslav Likachev researches right-wing groups. He says it's correct that the founders of Azov harbored neo-Nazi views, but insists that's changed now.
All those guys who were interested in politics more than in military action, they gone from the battalion and regiment after the first several months of its existing in 2014.
Natalia doesn't want to get into Azov's controversial past. She's more worried for her brother, Artem.
Here he was texting me that he's alive, and that's it. He writes very short messages, unfortunately.
Holding on to signs of life and hoping her brother will return alive.